The state of California already caps the amount that landlords can increase the rent in 1 year at 10%. But that's not good enough for tenants and tenant advocates. They want to cap it at 5% and making it one of the most strict rent control policies in the entire country. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the state rent cap in the state of California. So there is a bill being proposed out there that would not only cap rents at 5%, a maximum of 5% in a year for the entire state, but it also would make eviction protections even stronger than they are right now. Now, obviously, California has already the strongest rent protections in the entire country, probably of any state. So making them even worse, making it even harder for landlords to be able to remove tenants is going to be an awful thing. And, I'm 100% opposed to it, as you should be as well. And once I read the article, you're going to understand that, hey, this is not a good deal for landlords. Now, the rent cap issue, I'm 100% opposed to rent control as well, but they're making rent control even worse. They were saying, hey, the amount that we were already going to allow landlords to raise the rent is too much. It's too much. We need to lower that amount because prices are going up too high and we just can't allow. You see, this is the problem with these government price controls. Once they put them into place, then they will continue to chip away at the amounts until basically landlords are not even getting any rent increase. Maybe they're taking a rent decrease from year to year. It's ridiculous, okay? Rather than allowing landlords to be able to set their prices determined on, their personal expenses, they're putting the government in charge of how much rent increases should be, and that's going to be disastrous. It's going to be absolutely disastrous for landlords and property owners throughout the state. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Are you surprised that the state of California wants to lower the cap, that they allow rent increases to be in a single year? I'm not. I see it decreasing even more as time goes by. Right now they're like, well, 10% increase is too high, so we're going to limit it to 5%. Well, maybe a 5% will be too high next year, and they want to limit it to 2%, and so on, and just chip away at every single little bit that landlords are able to increase their rents until there's nothing left. And what they really want to do is bankrupt the landlords. They think the landlords are evil. I mean, it's a stupid socialist idea that somehow things would be better if the government was in charge of housing. And it's just not the truth. You can look at all the public housing projects and how much disrepair and problems they have, and you can see that, hey, government being in charge of housing is not the solution that people think it is. So anyway, let me get into this article. This article is coming from therealdeal.com, and it says, California Landlord Group launches opposition to rent cap bill. SB 567 would lower the state's maximum rent increases. Yeah, and it's probably going to pass. I mean, just being honest here. I'm never surprised when I see any sort of legislation that takes away property rights and hurts landlords in the state of California. And I'm never surprised when it passes. Days before a bill that would lower a statewide cap on rent increases is scheduled for a review by a Senate committee, the California Apartment Association has launched an opposition campaign, arguing that the legislation would slow down renovations. Earlier this year, State Senator Maria Elena Durazo of Los Angeles proposed the bill, intended to help low-income renters and alleviate homelessness. One of the things that they constantly do, with all this anti-landlord legislation is they say, oh, well, this, we need these rules, we need these regulations because it's going to help the homelessness issue. No, it won't, okay? Homelessness is not being caused by the factors they think it is, okay? It's not the fact that the rents are increasing that's causing the epidemic of people out there on the streets in California. That's a problem with too much drugs and too much mental health issues, and the state not responding correctly to those two problems. Now, if we're trying to keep housing more affordable, what we need is to make it less expensive for developers to build new housing. Okay, you make it less expensive, they will build more housing. If you make it less regulations, less hoops they have to jump through, they will build more housing. But you've made it both, extremely expensive, and you've made it so they got to jump through a ton of hoops before they can build anything. So, that's the reason why you don't see a lot of affordable housing being built there. It's just you've made it too difficult with all your policies, stuff like mandating that houses have solar panels on the roofs, or mandating a sprinkler system in a single family home. That's the kind of ridiculousness that you see in the state of California. Huge mandates, for environmental reasons or for whatever, and it causes the cost of housing to go up. And it looks like, oh, it's just a small bit. Once you add 10 or 20 different mandates on there, it's a huge amount of the price is going to complying with what the government regulations say. The bill would make it more difficult to evict a problem tenant and significantly limits the ability to renovate older rental units, a release from CAA says. This would make it harder to invest in and maintain older housing and to make important seismic and environmental renovations. Durazo's bill, SB 567, would strengthen the existing California Tenant Protection Act of 2019. That law went into effect in 2020 with a 10-year sunset, applied to buildings that were at least 15 years old, and, among other provisions, introduced just cause eviction protections and an annual rent cap of 10% or 5% plus inflation, whichever is lower. So, no matter what, right now, because California already has statewide rent control. They have this they call the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, right? And that put this 10% cap in place, okay? And it also put just cause eviction protections throughout the entire state. So throughout the entire state, it's already difficult to remove tenants. It's already where landlords can't increase their rents to the amount they need to, but they say that's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's never going to be good enough for these tenant rights people, okay? No matter what the law says, they're going to want more. They're going to want to take more from the landlords. And, that's the truth. I mean, you see what's happening right here. They put a rent cap in place, and that's not, the 10% cap. Now, the biggest problem is for those landlords who had kept their rents low long term and didn't increase them, and kept their housing very affordable. So you might have a tenant in there that is paying far below market rents. And let's say that this person passes away and somebody else now is the new owner, and they're like, hey, I can't afford the mortgage payment based on this $500 a month rent that I'm getting from this tenant. Now, every other house in this area, they're paying $1,000 a month, but this tenant is only paying $500. Well, with a 10% cap, you'd only be able to raise the rent $50 a month. Okay, so you'd be able to raise it to $550. So your rents would still be $450 below what the market rents are, but you wouldn't be able to pay your mortgage. Okay, so when you hear about rent increases and how unfair they are, and the tenants saying, oh well, if the landlord increases the rent, we won't be able to afford to live here anymore. It's like, yeah, you can't afford to live there. If you can't afford reality, maybe you have to move on to somewhere that you can afford. Maybe you getting that 2-bedroom apartment and getting a sweetheart deal on it for so long was just you being lucky, and maybe you should have set aside that extra money that you were saving, and so that when the free ride ended, you would have money to move on to somewhere else. But you didn't do that, no. And now you're complaining, and you want to force the landlords to subsidize your rent going on into the future forever, and that's wrong. Okay. SB 567 would lower the state rent cap threshold to either 5% or the inflation increase, whichever is lower. It would also strengthen just cause provisions to apply to tenants' first year in the unit, close other just cause loopholes, and add options for tenants to address violations. And I don't know if this article says it or not, right? But they want to close some of the just cause loopholes that allow landlords to be able to renovate their, remove tenants so that they can renovate their properties. Okay, I had read that in another article, and I don't have a site for that, but that is part of what I was hearing about this law. So they think it's a wrong thing for landlords to be able to remove tenants to be able to renovate their properties, and then they want to. So if a landlord says, "Hey, I'm going to remove this tenant to renovate my property," they have to come up with documentation and all that they're actually going to be able to do the work. So basically, they're making it as much of a hassle as possible. They're going to give tenants the right to appeal that, and it's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, now rather than just being able to do the work in my property, I have to jump through 1,000 hoops in order to remove this tenant, and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way at all. We should be allowed to operate our businesses as we see fit. Now, the 5% rent cap thing is going to be a disaster. It's going to be an absolute disaster. There's already too many landlords who were dependent upon appreciation in the state of California, and they were running on very, very thin margins. Well, with property tax increases, with possible mortgage interest rates going up, a lot of them are going to be upside down. And like I said, it's going to be a very, very bad thing. So, yeah, look out for this law. I'm going to do an update on it if it does end up passing. And, we'll see what happens. But like I said, I am not optimistic in terms of thing being defeated.